Hello and welcome back to another week of Open Mic Night. So glad that you guys could join us this evening. Tonight we're going to have a really fun show. We're going to answer some of your guys' questions that you guys have been posting in the Facebook group. And we're also going to talk about some of the latest Mac news. And there is definitely some good news. So stick around. It's going to be a really fun show. All right, so like I said, welcome back to another week of Open Mic Night. So glad you guys could join us this evening. Tonight is a fun night because there's a lot of big Apple news, and you guys know how much of an Apple fanboy I am. And there's also a lot of really good questions that have been posted in the Facebook group or emailed to me. And we are going to talk all about those and answer those questions for you guys, so it'll be a pretty fun show. First off, though, I want to thank WLMN Radio for their support of this show. They are just amazing over there. So if you guys have not checked out WLMNradio.com, go over there and check them out. If you like tech talk like I do, music, all that sort of stuff, they do it all. So go over there to WLMNradio.com. A big thank you to Roger and everything he's done for me. He helps me out with the software I use, and he also streams me live over there. So some of you might actually be listening to us live right now at WLMNradio.com. So a big welcome to you guys, and thanks for joining. It's a lot of fun. Love having you guys here. So a big thank you to him. But moving on from that, tonight, I actually tweeted out that there's going to be a live Spreaker link. And so, I am on Spreaker, and I do upload my podcast to Spreaker after the fact. But this week I was going to try and start streaming live. And of course, anytime you try to throw something new into the mix, it doesn't work as well as you planned. So actually, tonight when I went live with Spreaker, I could not get the input to switch from my built-in microphone on my laptop to the mixer. And so, alas, this week, live Spreaker did not happen. But hopefully having that fixed by next week. Again, it was kind of a last-minute decision anyway to add in the live Spreaker. But, sometimes you just can't count on technology. You can't count on it working for you. And so I could not get that going. The episode will still be on Spreaker. So if you do listen on Spreaker, it will be uploaded there. It's just not streaming live right now. And so on that live page, I know that I have the Spreaker box down there that's actually not playing the current episode. And so hopefully no one has clicked that and is listening to last week's episode thinking it's this week. So I guess there's no way of telling if they are. But a big thank you to all of you guys who are going to come out live tonight or that are already here. It's fun having you guys here. So if you guys don't know, I stream live every Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. Central Time. And if you guys come on out to omnpodcast.com/live, we are there with a chat room, and you can watch live and ask me questions or talk with everyone else who is watching live. And just it adds a whole nother element to the show. It's a lot of fun. Live call-ins. I've gotten a few emails on when live call-ins will be back. That will most likely be back next week. I have a new system for doing call-ins, and that'll be next week. But as we saw with Spreaker tonight, who knows? You just can't. I will never promise you guys any new technology on the show because I just can't guarantee it. As hard as I try, it just never works out the way you plan. But yeah, so that is live. And for those of you guys, if you guys want to subscribe to the show, omnpodcast.com, all the information is there, all the subscription links and everything like that. But you guys already know that. omnpodcast.com. Head on over there for all of the show notes and the subscription links. It is all there. But let's just jump right into the show tonight. If I'm a little frazzled, it's because of the whole Spreaker thing. It just really threw me off. But we're just going to jump right into the show, and get going with things. But let's start talking with the news. So there's two pieces of news from Apple tonight, and the first one is the smaller bit of news, but it was exciting for me because I am in their beta program, but Apple has released the latest Mac OS update for their beta program. And so if you are part of the beta program, and I think actually if you want to be part of it, you can still sign up through their public beta. But right now, you can go in and sign up, and you can download actually the next version of the Mac OS X, the latest version of Yosemite, and you can test it out. Now, usually this isn't a very big deal because, the upgrades there's little upgrades here and there, to improve performance and all that stuff. But one of the big updates coming with this next version of Yosemite is the new Photos application. Now, we heard about this last summer when Apple started announcing their kind of switch, and Apple is actually moving away from iPhoto and Aperture, Aperture being their pro end and iPhoto being their consumer end photo editors, and they're moving all to this new Photos application. Now, under the beta, actually, you can't talk about what's in the beta, so I can't tell you guys what I've seen with the new Photos application. But to be honest, I haven't actually had too much time to play with it because it just came out yesterday. So yesterday, I got the email from Apple and installed the latest version, so I am up and running the latest beta version on my laptop, not on my production machine, but on my laptop. And so I'm going to play around with the Photos app, and I'm kind of excited to do it because this is a huge switch for Apple. When you guys think about Apple, you think of things like photo editing and editing videos and audio and being creative. I mean, that's kind of where Mac got their name, was being creative. And that's what you think of when you're on the Mac side. And so for Apple to completely switch the applications that you edit photos with, that's a large switch for them. And this actually could be a make it or break it moment for Apple. I don't think people are actually, they're not talking about this enough. I think this is a huge story. Now, it's not getting as much press as I think, but just with like I said, with the entire creativity background that Apple has, and that's why people use Macs, for them to go in and switch up the tool that we use, I think that's a really big deal. And so for those of you guys who are currently using iPhoto and Aperture, when this new version comes out, you will no longer have iPhoto on your computer. It will not be installed. It will be the new Photos app. And so that's if you get a new computer. Now, I'm not really sure yet when you upgrade, when you do run the update. When I run the update, I am in the beta, but I do still have iPhoto, or I still do have iPhoto on my computer. So it didn't completely get rid of iPhoto for me, but I'm not sure how that will work for updates in the future for you guys. So I'll keep you kind of up to date on that, but it's something to watch out for if you're a Mac user and you are a heavy iPhoto user or Aperture user. Be sure you kind of keep up to date before you update your computer to the next big version of Yosemite, because that could be a big deal. You could be out kind of your major tool, especially if it's your daily driver, if it's something you use for your job or something you use every day. Just be sure you're keeping up to date with what exactly is going to happen with the update. And one good way to do that is to keep watching Open Mic Night. I will keep you guys informed when this thing goes public, when it's out of beta and it goes out to the public. I will let you guys know kind of what's going on with Photos and what exactly it's going to do to your current iPhoto or Aperture library and system settings and all that sort of stuff. But I think beyond the iPhoto user, so, I'm a consumer user of photos. I use iPhoto to organize all my photos. I go on vacation, I bring photos in, I import them, I use iPhoto. But honestly, I don't do a lot of editing and I don't do a lot of, organization or anything like that with my photos. It's probably one of the worst points of my technology organization is my photo library. I'm sure some of you guys out there would cringe if you just saw my massive, unorganized stack of photos I have in iPhoto. But for me, the bigger change for this is going to be on the pro side. So they're abandoning Aperture, which, like I said, with being a creative company like Apple is, we've seen this in the past and we've seen the outrage from the pro community. We saw when they really, really dug in and took out a lot of the nuts and bolts of Final Cut. When they went to Final Cut 10, they made a big upgrade from Final Cut 9 to 10. It was a kind of a massive overhaul. They took out a lot of big features and they added stuff in, but the pro community was kind of outraged. They kind of made Final Cut more of a consumer app than a pro app. And, people are saying for that price point and stuff like that, they kind of ignored their pro users. And so I'm sure Apple is going to kind of take the heat again on this one once people start playing with photos and find out, it's not as full-featured as Aperture. I think they're going to be upset. So support for Aperture is going to be discontinued, and they're no longer going to be supporting it. They want everyone to move to Photos. Now, so we've kind of yet to see why Apple's doing this, why they did this in Final Cut, and why they did this to Aperture. It could be that they want to focus more on their hardware and their operating system as a whole, and they don't want to be as involved in the individual apps. That could be one thing, but for at least for someone like Adobe, this is probably actually a very good thing. For all these other companies out there that sell, Photoshop, stuff like that, Lightroom from Adobe, they're actually going to they like this. They think it's a very good thing because now all these pro users that were using Aperture have to find some other way to edit their photos. Now, admittingly, I don't think a lot of people do use Aperture. I think at least a lot of the professional photographers I know do not use it. They use a lot of Adobe software and other software besides Aperture, but there is still a big user base out there that uses Aperture, and I'll be interested to see when they do make this final switch over, how it does affect that community. But like I said, I won't be able to talk about the Photos app that I see in beta. What I would suggest to you guys is if you have an extra Mac lying around that, is collecting dust or something like that, something you don't normally use, definitely I never suggest running a beta on your production machine. It's just what I do because it's what I preach, is don't do it on a production machine, because you just never know in a beta what's going to go wrong and what's going to break and what application you use that's not going to work in the beta, and it's just going to throw off everything you do for your productivity. So definitely, where was I going? Oh yeah. So, but if you have an extra Mac computer lying around, you can still sign up for the public beta. That's one nice thing about Apple switching to this public beta program, is that anyone that wants to really can get in there and test out this software. And the more public beta, the more people that get in on the public beta, the better this software is going to run when it's released to the public, because it has feedback software built in. So now I've got this brand new fancy feedback icon in my dock where if I ever run into any problems with the new beta, I can just report it straight to Apple. And so they are listening and they are taking that advice in, and they are going to be looking at all that stuff and taking all that advice and putting it and making sure that that final product that's released to the public is top notch, at least as top notch as it can be for a new launch of software. So that's kind of the first thing of big news for Apple, is that they released this public beta for the newest version, and everyone's going to be trying it out. And I'm sure you guys will hear a lot about it for the next few weeks, because there are people out there that do break the rules and they do talk about it. So I'm sure you guys will hear more details as time goes on. Like I said, it was just released yesterday, which is the 2nd of March, for those of you guys not listening tonight live. And so the second bit of Apple news is actually the most exciting, and it is that there is going to be another Apple event scheduled for March 9th. Now, obviously, everyone is just assuming that this is going to be the watch announcement. So the Apple Watch, the long-anticipated Apple Watch, it was announced last year, and they said early 2015 is when we're going to get the watch. And, for me, early 2015, that would have meant probably in the first 2 months. But, I've talked to other people and they say, no, early is any time in the first really, 2 quarters. The first half of the year is technically early. So I would disagree on that. I was kind of thinking this announcement would have come in January or February, but not too much later, March 9th, actually earlier than some analysts predicted. Some analysts were predicting we weren't going to hear an announcement from Apple until mid-April. They might be grouping it in with the iPad announcement, and they still might have another iPad announcement along with this, but a lot of people are thinking it's just going to be the Apple Watch on March 9th, and they're going to give us a release date, all the prices, all the details that we did not get back last year when they announced the Apple Watch. And so the Apple Watch is an interesting product, and I want to take just a little bit of time to talk about it with you guys, because I wanted to see I want your guys' feedback. So if you guys have feelings about this Apple Watch, if you're watching live, you can definitely go in the chat room, but definitely just send me an email, and that's mike@uyghurtech.com, because there are a ton of mixed reviews around the Apple Watch, and it's kind of funny. The few Mac podcasts I listen to, the co-hosts I have heard go from when they announced it to now, they've gone all over the board. They've been excited about it. They said it's not going to work. They say it's going to, sell 5 million units in the first week. They're kind of all over the board. And I think, as Apple fanboys, when you tell us about a product this far back and then it's not until March of the next year that we actually get all the details about it, our feelings change a little bit, and we start to see what other companies are announcing, and we start to see all the other wearables that other companies start to put out, and our feelings do change about the Apple Watch. So I know personally, my feelings have definitely changed about the Apple Watch. I'm actually more optimistic now than I ever was about the Apple Watch. I think I kind of went in a flow of, the first week after the announcement, when they first announced, I was really excited. Obviously, wearables were still relatively new back when they announced it, and a lot of the companies had not released their wearables yet. A few had. There were a few Android models out there, and those actually were fantastic wearables that the Android line came out with first. I think there was the Moto had one, and I think it was the Moto 360. I'm going to butcher the names on their products, but there were a lot of other wearables out there that were doing really well, but they weren't huge yet. And so when Apple first announced them, I think I was really excited. And then as I started to see that they weren't going to have it in time for Christmas and it wasn't going to be in January, I started to get a little pessimistic on actually how effective this was for Apple to announce their watch so far in advance. Now, obviously, the tactic from Apple from announcing way back then was that they kind of wanted to hedge all the other companies' sales for the Christmas season. If you had someone that would normally buy an Apple Watch and, they're like, well, I don't know what to buy. I don't know if Apple's going to come out with one. I might just buy another one for Christmas. Apple kind of said, hey, just wait. We're going to have one next year. And so Apple, the whole announcement scheme was, I think, a lot to kind of make sure people who were big Apple fanboys and people who would buy the watch waited around and didn't go off and buy another company's wearable so that they would have, that's why they did it. Now, like I said, I got a little pessimistic on how really, how that was going to work. When they showed some of the pictures, honestly, I didn't think it was that good looking of a watch. And that's a first for me. Usually I absolutely love the way Apple products look. I fell in love with the 6 Plus as soon as I saw it. I thought it was a fantastic looking phone, large screen. I loved it. But when the Apple Watch came out, I honestly didn't like the look of it. And so what I was excited for in that first week was just the idea of a wearable and the idea of an Apple wearable specifically. But then as the months started to go on, I started to realize, I don't even like the look of this thing. And are people actually going to wait around and buy this from Apple? So I guess we will see. We will see on March 9th when the announcement date is going to be and exactly what price these Apple Watches are going to sell for. The Apple Watch price has been one of the kind of hottest issues to blog about lately. We've had so many analysts go back and forth on exactly how expensive these Apple Watches are going to be. Now, I believe Apple said it was either $300 or $400 is going to be the starting price for the Apple Watch, but what they didn't talk about was how expensive the highest end watches they sell are going to be. Now, those watches, obviously, I think they're called the Apple Watch Edition. So they're the Apple Watch Edition, that's what they're called. And they're going to be made out of gold, and they're going to have fantastic, extravagant bands and everything for them. So some analysts are predicting that version of the watch, the Apple Watch Edition, could actually go for upwards between $5,000 and $10,000. Some analysts saying even above that. Now, the average I've seen is that the Apple Watch Edition is going to go between $5,000 and $10,000. Some analysts are predicting $15,000 to $20,000, but I highly doubt that. But it makes sense, right? If Apple is going after that high-end market, high-end watches can go for that amount of money. Now, will people actually buy them at that price is the question. But Apple has always charged a premium for their devices. You pay a lot of money for a laptop, a Mac laptop that has the equivalent specs of a Windows laptop. You pay a lot more money for that, but people do. People pay that price premium for Apple for a lot of different reasons, but they do pay it. So I'll be very interested to see where the price point on this Apple Watch Edition comes out, and I'm really excited to see what the numbers of sales are after the first quarter of sales. I would love to see that. Now, sadly, analysts are saying that we're probably not ever going to see the exact numbers of Apple Watches sold. It's not one of the categories that Apple usually, I think they'll lump it into kind of this other category. They usually tell us about iPads and iPhones and Mac, but they don't really break out anything beyond that. So they're saying Apple probably won't tell us the exact number of sales. We still might. You never know. But they're starting to speculate that we're actually never going to get that number of exact sales. But so with that watch, though, you got to think, too, this is kind of, this whole watch thing can just lead one thing to another. But when you have that expensive of a product, and also when you have a product that's more of a fashion icon, it's something that people are going to have to try on. They sell a bunch of different bands. The bands on the Apple Watch are my favorite part of the watch, and the watch's biggest selling point is they have a lot of these specialty bands. They have leather bands and metal bands, a band for pretty much everyone. If there's not a band for you, then you don't like watches, is pretty much what I have found out. But when you have a product like that in your store, this is going to really have to change how the Apple Store operates. If you guys have ever been to an Apple Store, you walk in and it's largely focused on their products. You pick them up, you feel them, you kind of look at them, but there's not a lot of them. For most part, when I've been in the Apple Store, it's super busy. And if everyone wanted to go feel or touch a computer, there wouldn't be enough. But, with stuff like computers and iPads and phones, you don't really need to. People pick it up, they touch it. They usually usually know within a few minutes if they like it or not. And it's not something that has a lot of options. With the iPhone, there's a few different colors, and then you have to pick the size of hard drive you want. That's really all you got to pick. There's not many options people have to sit around and play with and actually touch the device. But when you have something like an Apple Watch, that's something that someone's going to have to sit there and try on 1, 5, 10, 15 different bands in different sizes in the Apple Watch, the Sport, or the Edition version. There's just so many endless combinations for this Apple Watch that this could dynamically change the way the Apple Store functions. First of all, people I think are going to be spending a lot more time in the Apple Store. Second of all, it's going to be a lot more congested because if people are spending more time trying on these devices, that means they're staying in there longer. More people are going to be in the stores. And then also your staff of the Apple Store is going to have to be trained almost like a retail fashion store. They're going to have to be trained how to, help people try these devices on and play with the different bands and stuff like that. So they're going to be trained in a completely different sales, I don't want to call it a tactic, but almost sales tactics, or sales skills than they have had to have in the past. Now, one of the latest websites is reporting that actually one of the managers from each Apple store is being flown to Cupertino for this sort of training, exactly what we just talked about for Apple Watch sale training. And then those managers will go back to their store and train their store's employees on exactly how to sell these Apple Watches. Now, besides the whole issue of, training your salespeople, you also need a different way to keep these devices safe. Apple Watches are really tiny, but they also cost a lot of money. They're worth a lot of money, and some are made of gold. And so you've got to, it's almost going to become jewelry store security. Now, there are reports that Apple is actually having their own safes built, and these safes will actually have charging ports for the Apple Watch so that while they are safe and locked up in the back room, they can still be charging for the next day. And also they'll have some sort of inventory tracking, so where when they plug in the watches, they know exactly how many they have, how many they should have, and if any are missing, obviously they can track those down. So this whole Apple releasing a watch, people think, okay, yeah, they're just adding a watch, but that dramatically changes Apple's entire kind of ecosystem of products. First of all, you have another wearable, but second of all, just the effect it has on the store in general, I think is one of the most interesting things. And that's a lot of money for Apple to put into something. There's been a lot of people talking about how, this Apple Watch might be just kind of a second thought from Apple. Yeah, they wanted a wearable, and so they put it out there. I don't think so, because although Apple has more money than anyone and they have enough money, they could literally just have bonfires of money and it'd be completely fine. But I don't think Apple would spend this much money, first of all, on a product, and second of all, on all the changes to their retail stores just for a second thought product. And so, I just don't think that would have happened. I don't think they would do that. And so I do think that, I do think they will do well. And I think that Apple did think about them. And so I think that when we get and we see these Apple Watches in store and we actually get to touch them and feel them, that is when we're going to start really knowing if this Apple Watch is going to succeed or not. It's really hard to predict if a product is going to do well when we don't even know all the details about it. We don't know the prices. We don't know the release date. We don't know anything like that. And so I think once people can get these into their hands, that is when we are going to know. But March 9th, we will find out exactly when that release date is and the prices and all that sort of stuff. Hopefully. That's the hope. That's the plan. And so that is going to be it for the Apple news so far. And so March 9th, be sure to be on the watch for that event. Obviously, I'm going to recap that on Open Mic Night. We will talk all about what happens at that March 9th event, whether it be Apple Watch or whether it be iPad or something else that they surprise us with. Who knows? But everyone's pretty certain that it's going to be the Apple Watch. And so now we are going to move into the questions that were asked in the Facebook group and also some tips and tricks from emails that I have received in the past year. And so I want to thank Katie for posting her question in the Facebook group, and hers is all about the iPhone battery. And so the iPhone battery, obviously it's not removable. And so a lot of people struggle with the Apple battery because they can't just replace it. So they want to take good care of it, and then also they want to know why their battery's draining so fast, and they want to take the best care of their battery, and they want to get the most out of their iPhone battery. And so Katie said that hers is draining extremely fast, and so she wanted just some tips on how to keep her iPhone battery going longer. So, there's going to be a lot of generic tips I give out on the battery issue because there's a lot of things that, you can do. They're pretty easy to save some battery life. You guys might have already done them and you might do them already, but just in the off chance there's some of you that aren't doing these, there's just a few good practices for your phone. So when you're dealing with batteries, keeping the juices flowing is the term I've always heard. And so you want to keep your battery in use. So what this means is that you don't want to keep your phone plugged in all the time. And usually you want to pull your phone off of charge as soon as it's on 100. Now, obviously, a lot of us plug our phones in at night and it charges and it's going to be at 100 for maybe an hour or two in the morning. Now, that's fine. That's not really what I'm talking about. But what you want to do is you want to make sure you're charging your phone up and you're using your battery, getting it down to around 30, 20, 10% before you're plugging it back in. You want to keep the electrons flowing. And, that's always what they say. So if you're at work and maybe you always plug your phone in when you're at your desk, actually try to not do that. I know that it's hard if you're going to be going on a trip and you want to charge your phone. That's fine. But I've seen a lot of people where, they pull their phone off the charger and they drive to work and they just plug it right back in because they want it to stay charged all the time. That's actually not good for your battery. You want to keep the electrons flowing on your battery all the time. And so charging it and then letting it deplete itself. Now, don't let it deplete itself all the way. That was one myth, I think, that went around a long time ago where it was like, okay, you want to drain your battery all the way until it dies. And actually, I believe that. I used to actually do that. That's actually not the best thing for your battery. You do want to get it low, but don't let it actually deplete itself 100%. That's actually not good for your battery either. Now, there's obviously a bunch of different opinions on how battery life works and what's the best way to do it. That's just the way I've always been taught, is to keep the electrons flowing. So if you just keep that in mind, keep that in the back of your head, that will actually help keep the battery life go a lot longer. So you're going to get a lot more charge cycles out of your battery if you take care of your battery. And this also applies, I know I'm talking specifically about the iPhone, but this also applies largely to laptops. Now, I'm even guilty of this whenever I'm around a power outlet. Usually I'm wanting to plug my laptop in so that I always have enough battery power. But again, it's the same thing on the laptop. And the hard thing is laptops are now becoming people's desktops. We use a laptop almost all the time. Some people don't even leave, they don't even move their laptop from their desk. It is their home computer. But sometimes you do want to plug in your phone, sometimes you do want to plug in your computer, charge it up, and then just unplug it. And it's easy with the MagSafe on the Macs. You kind of want to just unplug it, let it go down while you're sitting there, and then charge it back up. That will usually give you the best sort of battery life. Okay, and actually, this is good. So this is why I have the live chat room tonight. Jim in the chat room says, actually, what I was talking about is not a myth. It's required for older batteries and those with memory. And I'm assuming he's referring to letting it drain all the way down and go out to zero and then charging it back up. I think that's what he's referring to. So maybe that's not a myth. And see, this is where it helps having people in the chat room who know a little bit more about this stuff than I do. So he said it's not a myth and it's actually required for those older batteries and those ones with memory, which is good to know. So here are some tips to actually save battery life. So you're going out in the day, you've unplugged your phone, and you just want to get the most out of your battery. There's actually one thing you guys can do, and the thing I usually tell people first is on the iPhone. What a lot of people don't know is that when you go to your general settings, so if you go to settings, general, and usage, you can actually click on battery usage. And it'll take a little bit, but then it will tell you exactly what apps are using the most battery on your phone. And it'll do it in the last 24 hours, or you can switch it over to the last 7 days. And so if people have the Facebook app installed, usually I can guarantee that is near the top. It's either number 1 or number 2 on the battery usage. And at least that's been true for me for a while. And for all the people I've been looking at, Facebook just does suck a lot of battery. And it does it even while you're using it and while you're not using it. It's just one of those things. Facebook is a huge battery hog. And so then but it's nice to see this though. When you go to your battery usage, you can really start to see, okay, so for me, my podcast app takes up 13%. My Spotify app also takes up 13%. So I'm seeing that, that makes sense because I listen to podcasts all the time, and I'm either listening to podcasts or music on my phone when I'm driving around, when I'm working out, all that sort of stuff. So that makes sense for me that those are that high. What this is good for is this is good at detecting any app that you don't think should be using that much battery. And so if I am going in here and I'm like, wow, man, for example, let's say I'm trying to pick one here. Let's say Instagram. For me, it's not, but let's say Instagram is using like 65% of your battery, then you know that there might be something with Instagram, some setting you have on that is using a lot of battery in that app. So go into your settings first of all, and just see if those apps make sense. If you use Facebook a lot, that might make sense. Make sure that the apps in the top, I'd say 5 or 6, are actually apps that you guys are using. It's usually a good indicator. So go in there, and then so my next thing off of that is to always go in and check your settings on your individual apps. And so I know I posted in the Facebook group about this earlier, and Jim actually confirmed that it's turned off by default. But on Facebook, there's this new feature. I don't even know how new it is. I don't know when they added it in. I just noticed it on a friend's phone, and then I checked on mine. But it's called Nearby Friends. And so this Nearby Friends feature on Facebook it checks your GPS location every so often. It also checks to see if, hey, are any of your friends nearby? So if you have this feature enabled, even when your Facebook app is not in use, so even if you're just not using that app on your phone, if your phone's in standby mode, whatever, Facebook is still using your GPS and your data to check in with that. And so that's one feature that I saw on Facebook that was a huge battery hog. Now, like I said, Jim did confirm that he thinks this is off by default, and I agree with him because mine was not on. But I know that a lot of times when Facebook has these new features, they'll maybe have a pop-up when it first comes up, and if you just happen to click enable, then it might be on and you might not realize it. So again, use that battery usage meter to kind of see your apps, and then if you notice one's really high or a lot higher than the other ones, go into that app and check settings, check location settings and stuff like that to see if there's anything wonky in the app that's making it use a lot of battery. All right, so like we were talking about, Wi-Fi is a lot better for your battery than using your cell signal. So when you're on Wi-Fi, it's not having to crank up those radios, and the radios for the cell network, so your Sprint, Verizon, that sort of stuff, your LTE radios use a lot more battery power than Wi-Fi does. So just make sure you're always on Wi-Fi. There's a lot of advantages to using Wi-Fi over using your data signal. First of all, it's faster. Second of all, it uses less battery. And third, you're not going to blow through your data cap that is given to you by Verizon or AT&T. And so there's just a lot of reasons to use Wi-Fi, but make sure your Wi-Fi is always on and try and be connected to a Wi-Fi network over using your cell network. That will save you a lot of battery. And sorry, I'm trying to read the chat room and see if people are still here. But okay, so the next tip I have for the battery life is using location services. So location services are great and sometimes they are necessary, but they are a drain on the battery. And so if you guys are using your location services on like a GPS app, that's great and that's good. But make sure that if you have GPS location services turned on for other apps, make sure they're actually useful. I know a lot of apps that I have request that it uses location services, but for me that doesn't increase the usability of that app, and so it's just one more battery hog, one more app using my location that I don't need it to. And so I always turn those off for any sort of app that I don't think actually needs it. And so if you guys go into your settings, your main system settings, then over there you can actually go in and you can turn off location services by individual app. And so that's just one consolidated area where you can just see every single app that uses your location data, and you can go in and turn it off or turn it back on if you ever need it again. And so that is one thing for your battery usage. And the next final thing is fully quitting apps. And so I know that this doesn't have a huge effect on battery, but it can, especially if you guys play any games. So I've noticed that some games, even when they are running in the background, still use actually a significant amount of power. So obviously you guys can still double tap on your home button and it brings up, your quick view, and then you can swipe those up to fully quit the app. So if you see any apps there, especially games, those usually use a little bit of power in the background. And so always fully quitting your apps is one of the best ways to save battery power as well. So like I said, go into your settings, go and look at your battery usage, look at the individual app and see what settings are causing a large amount of battery to be used by that app. Second, use Wi-Fi. Third, check that location settings, make sure those are all what you want. And fourth, fully quit the app. And that should help out your battery. I hope that answers your question, Katie. And I hope that works out for you and it saves you guys a little bit of battery. All right, so after that, I'm going to move on to my tip section. Now, I know last week I talked about how I was going to answer Michael Ray's question. Now, Michael Ray was posting a lot of articles about net neutrality, and it's a fantastic issue, and it's something I actually really want to talk about. However, I want to make sure that I am actually fully educated before I really give you guys a synopsis of net neutrality. Obviously, I have my opinions on net neutrality, and I have, what I think happened, but I kind of want to learn more about both sides. The vote actually went through, so as of right now, the internet is actually a utility. It was reclassified as utility thanks to the vote that happened, and so, but next week, I'm going to give you guys all the ins and outs, and I tried to prepare this week, but I think as we give it one more week, I'll be able to kind of get a bigger picture, a better picture of the way both sides were kind of coming to the table and trying to represent what they wanted with net neutrality. And so that is going to be next week. And so, Michael, I'm sorry. I know I said I was going to answer your question this week, but we're actually going to talk about that next week. And it'll be a spirited conversation. And another reason I want to wait till next week is because next week I will also have the live call-in back up. And so I can get you guys and get your opinions on net neutrality. And I don't know if it's a good thing or not. I've been told to maybe not open that can of worms and get people's opinion on net neutrality. But hey, I think it's fun, and that's what this podcast is about, is talking about that sort of stuff and having fun with it. So if you can't do it here, where can you do it? All over the internet, I guess. But yeah, it's a lot more fun here. So we will talk about that next week. But for the tips for this week, so these 3 things are questions that I've gotten emails about sometime in the last year, and I thought they'd be good things for you guys to know about and to learn about. And the first one is the Do Not Disturb feature that is on all now of the Mac devices. Now, a lot of people know about Do Not Disturb on the iPhone and the iPad. It's obviously you can swipe up from the main screen and you can hit the little moon icon and that turns on Do Not Disturb, meaning phone calls, text, and all that stuff will not really ring into your phone if you don't want them to. For if you're sleeping, or for me when I'm podcasting, I don't want them to be ringing in, so I turn on Do Not Disturb. But the question, actually, the email that I got about Do Not Disturb was actually about the computer side. So they said, hey, on the Mac, is there a way to turn on Do Not Disturb? And I said, man, that is a fantastic question because I actually hadn't done that before. But even tonight when I'm podcasting, I have audio going through my computer and I don't want all my notifications to be in the recording. So there is a way to turn on Do Not Disturb on your Mac. Now, it's actually kind of tricky to turn on, and they don't make it very straightforward. It's kind of hidden. So the way you do it is if you guys are on Yosemite, you guys know you have the notification bar on the side. So if you go up to the very top right-hand corner of your computer, you have the little lines, and what it does is it pops out that notification bar. Now, the way you turn on Do Not Disturb is you actually hold Option and click on that little menu icon. And you'll notice that when the menu bar pops out, Do Not Disturb will then be up top. It will not be up top until then. So I'm not sure of any other way to get Do Not Disturb on your Mac except for when you go in and you hit Option and click that menu bar item. And that is the only way to get Do Not Disturb, but it actually works really well. So if you do that, if you click Option and click on the menu icon, and you do turn on Do Not Disturb, it will block you out. It'll keep out the iMessages and any notification that would usually make sound on your computer. It will keep those out. Now, I'm not sure if it does it per application. I'm pretty sure if you still play audio through application, or if a notification comes in through a website, those sites will still, or those sounds will still play through. But it's a type of notifications like email, iMessage, that sort of stuff. That's the kind of thing that will be blocked out with the Do Not Disturb, which is very nice. So that was a great question. I'm glad someone asked that because Do Not Disturb on the computer could be useful for a lot of you guys, especially if you do any sort of audio recording and you don't want those other notifications to be thrown in the mix. All right, so the next question I had was someone had a bunch of files that they needed to send via email. So they had, I think it was 5 audio files that they wanted to send. They were relatively small, a megabyte each, and they said, can I just send these in one file? And I said, yes, the one way you can do that, and this actually covers a lot of different topics, but make a folder, put the items in the folder, and then what you're going to do is you're going to actually compress that folder. And so some people also have asked me, can you send just a folder? You can if you compress it. So on a Mac, if you right-click on a folder, there's actually an option that says compress and then it'll say the name of the folder. And what that does is you will then get another item right below it if you're in the Finder, or right next to it if you're on the desktop, and it's a zip file. So a zip file is all that is you can send it over to someone, they can unzip it, and they will have that folder with all of those files in them. So if you're looking for a quick way to send about 10, 20, let's say, Word documents, and you don't want to attach each one individually, you can always just throw them into a folder, compress it, which makes a zip, and then you can send that zip over, and that is the quickest way to do that. So that is compressing folders and sending a lot of files at once via email or uploading to a website, however you do it. All right, and the next one I had was about Plex. Now, Plex obviously is a extremely powerful kind of media server product. And the best part about Plex is that it is free. And so when we start getting into media storage, media streaming, media servers, this is a topic that, especially now, there are a ton of different ways to do it. And with the things like Synology, and Drobo and all of these network attached storage devices, there are a bunch of different ways that you guys can actually store your media, stream your media all over the house. But I kind of want to tell you guys about Plex because it's what I use, and someone specifically asked me about Plex and if I've used it on the Mac and how it works, and I actually really like it. So for those of you who don't know kind of what a media server would be, a media server is pretty much wherever you store, let's say, all of your movies. So I have my whole movie collection. I have them ripped down to my computer, which means now I have them as a file, a movie file on my computer. But, it doesn't really do me any good just to have them on this one computer because I want to watch my movies on my iPad. I want my wife to be able to watch them if you have kids and all that sort of stuff. So what a media server does, it's pretty much a computer that stores all of your media, your music, your videos, your photos, and then allows other computers or other tablets or phones to connect to it and get that media. That's pretty much, in essence, what a media server is. Now, the great thing about Plex is Plex can turn any computer into a media server. So I have Plex running on my iMac right now. My iMac made sense to be a Plex server because it's always on, it's always staying in the same spot, and it's always on my network, unlike a laptop that leaves and comes back. So I have all of my movies stored on an external hard drive that's plugged into my computer, and then when you run the Plex program, and if you just Google Plex, you can find their website and download it. It's completely free to use, except for I think you have to pay for the app on the phone. And then if you want to download the movies from your computer to your phone, I think you have to pay for the Plex Pass, which is I think $4 or $5 a month. But pretty much you download the Plex application and you say, hey, this is the folder where my movies are. This is the folder where my music is, where my photos are. And it does the rest. And the great thing about Plex is that all I did was I ripped these movies down and I put them in a folder. But when Plex sees those folder, it'll automatically tell you what movie it is. It'll get the album art. It'll get all of the, the rating, the Rotten Tomatoes rating. It'll get the main actors, the synopsis, all of that stuff. It'll actually pull that all in for you. So you actually don't have to go in and put in all the metadata. You guys can just pretty much throw your movies into a folder and let Plex do the rest. And so the reason I love Plex is because Plex is now actually on the Xbox, and so my Mac has all the movies, but on when I want to watch them on the TV, I just fire up my Xbox. It has the Plex app on it, and I can actually just stream those movies directly from my computer to my Xbox and watch them on the TV. You can do the same thing to your iPad, to your iPhone, or to anything else like that. So that's Plex. And so if you guys want to play around with Plex, if you guys have any other questions, go ahead and email me, mike@weakertech.com, and I can answer any of your questions. It can be a tad complicated, but it's usually not too bad. Plex makes it pretty easy to go in there and set it up and get it all up and running and stuff like that. So definitely give it a try. All right, and so that is going to do it for the tips and tricks, and that is the last topic before we kind of get into our main topic for the night. And so what I want to finish up with was this discussion I had with someone, and it was a kind of a debate on where do you buy your applications when you're on a Mac? Is it better to buy the application from the Mac App Store, or is it better to buy the app straight through the developer's website? The best example of this is something like ScreenFlow. ScreenFlow is a fantastic application on the Mac. It allows you to record yourself and your screen. So if you're doing screencasts, any sort of software tutorial, it's fantastic. I use ScreenFlow for every one of my tutorials on YouTube. It's the application I use. Now, ScreenFlow is available for sale in the Mac App Store, or you can buy the app straight through their website, the developer website. And I was talking to someone about the advantages and disadvantages of doing either of those. So usually most of the time, the pricing is going to be about the same for either. Now, the one thing about pricing, though, is through the Mac App Store, they don't have an ability to pretty much give free upgrades or discounted upgrades. And so when ScreenFlow went from ScreenFlow 4 to 5, ScreenFlow had to put out ScreenFlow 5 on the App Store and just discount the entire thing for everyone. So there wasn't technically an upgrade price if I had ScreenFlow 4. Everyone was getting the new price. So pricing can be a little odd on the Mac App Store the way they do upgrades. But usually pricing is about the same, and that's not really where the debate comes in on the Mac App Store versus the developer website. Where the debate comes in is that there is definitely an upside to using the Mac App Store to buy apps. And that upside is when I buy an app in the Mac App Store, it is now available on all my other computers that I use that same Apple ID for. So, for example, I have my iMac at home and I have my laptop. When I buy a piece of software, I know that I can install it on my Mac laptop and my iMac with a click of a button. I go into the App Store, I go to my purchases, and I can just download it. This is also good for if your hard drive crashes. You have your apps easily available. You don't have to write down your product codes. You don't have to go through your old emails and find those codes to install it, anything like that. You just go to the App Store, you log in with your Apple ID, and you re-download the software. So that is definitely a huge upside for the App Store. Now, I will admit that there are certain apps that I buy through the App Store and certain ones I don't. Something like ScreenFlow, I definitely bought through the App Store because I want to be able to have it on my computers. I know I'm going to have ScreenFlow for a long time, so I always want it there in case something goes wrong with my hard drive. It just made sense to buy ScreenFlow from the App Store. Now, the one downside to the App Store, and this was what actually my friend was arguing is, more important, and it's actually a bigger downside, so he actually buys everything through the developer website, is that everything through the Mac App Store has to be approved by Apple and it has to follow Apple's rules. This means that the apps are going to be sandboxed. Now, what sandboxing means is that apps can only play in their zone designated by Apple. They can't really do things that are outside their authority that Apple gives apps through the App Store. So this would mean that if your app wants to integrate with some other app or some other aspect, it might not be allowed depending on what Apple says their rules are. And so there are definitely certain features that Mac App Store versions do not have that certain features from the developer website will have. So I was trying to think of an example for this. Obviously, I've experienced this before, but can't think of one off the top of my head. But you might notice that when you buy an app through a developer website, you actually get more features than you do through the Mac App Store. So, you get the convenience of the Mac App Store, but you might have to give up a little bit of functionality because of the way Apple enforces their rules through the Mac App Store. So, I go back and forth. I sometimes I do I buy through the Mac App Store, and sometimes I buy through the developer website. And usually what that comes down to is I will do a lot of Googling to see if there are any sort of features that the developer website version has that the Mac App Store version will not have. And that's usually the deciding factor for me. And so in this debate, that is kind of what I kind of want to finish up with is when you're kind of deciding where you want to buy, I would say first go to the App Store. That is where I would first suggest that you buy your apps. And if it's there, usually that's where I'm going to buy it. But then do a quick Google search and just make sure you're not going to be missing out on any major features by buying the Mac Store version. But just the overall convenience that the Mac Store gives you, I think is worth it alone. I know that it saved me a lot of time and effort just being able to go into the Mac App Store and re-download those purchases. And it's also nice just being able to put it on your entire fleet of computers and not have to worry about product codes or only getting 2 installs or anything like that. You know that you can install it on any of your computers that are signed in with your Apple ID. And so that is pretty much going to wrap it up for the show tonight. Thank you so much for you guys who are sticking with me tonight. Tonight we ran into so many technical issues. I'm sorry about the YouTube version not going up. So actually this week we'll probably just have an audio version because I don't have any sort of backup video. So if you guys are listening to this live and if you're usually watching the video, thank you for switching over to the audio version. But I'll be sure to get this all back up and going before next week. One final announcement. I know I talked about it last week, but if you guys haven't noticed, Open Mic Night is a lot more Apple focused now. We're starting to focus a lot on Apple. And for any of you guys who want kind of the general tech side like I used to do before, I am actually going over and joining Jim Collison on the Home Gadget Geeks. Jim has been doing that show for years, and I'm actually going to be joining him as a co-host starting next week. I think on the 12th is the date that is starting. And so Home Gadget Geeks covers a wide gamut of technology, and they get some great interviews with some great companies in the technology sphere, and they do kind of what I did, was cover general tech stuff, which is fantastic. And so this show is going to be Apple focused, and if you guys want the general tech side, definitely head over. Jim's over at theaverageguy.tv. So theaverageguy.tv, and it's going to be Home Gadget Geeks, but definitely give his other shows a listen. Cyber Frontiers, and all those shows are fantastic as well. But that's going to be fun, and like I said, that is going to be starting next week. So thank you guys for all sticking around. I will see you guys next week, but until then, tech on.